My name is Luciana Berger. I've been asked to chair our discussion this morning at this seminar. It's entitled Homeshare, Reducing the Cost Burden for Councils by Early Intervention. I've been asked to join you. I was in Parliament for 10 years and I work in around public affairs and the public sector, and really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. We've got some really exciting speakers, 5 speakers with us over 4 different sections. And most importantly, lots of time for Q&A for people that have joined us to have the opportunity to contribute, to ask questions. And what we're going to do is to assemble those questions throughout and pose them at the end, although after Gretta and Rick's section, if people have got specific questions for Gretta and Rick, then we'll take them at that moment. So it's great to have you all with us. Please do ask your questions. We've now got 30 participants, 31. So I'm going to now hand over to our speakers. Each speaker will introduce themselves as they go. And it's a pleasure to introduce you first, Claire Kennedy. Well, that's me. I'll hand over to Claire to introduce herself. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks very much, Luciana. And it's really lovely to be here this morning and really lovely to see everyone. My name's Claire Kennedy, as it says on the slide. I'm co-founder and joint chief executive of an organisation called PPL. PPL is a social enterprise based in Southwark, and we work with public sector bodies on transformation and innovation. We also work with a range of voluntary sector partners on finding new and innovative ways that we are able to support them. Some of the things we do in that sort of field are, for example, we run a community hub in Southwark, which is available free of charge for our voluntary sector partners to be able to use as co-working space or a community gathering space for meetings and events, etc. Our philosophy is very much around allowing people and enabling people to be able to deliver really innovative work. I'm also the vice chair of New Local, which is a think tank very much focused on community power. And I've spent the past 20 years working in and around public sector reform and innovation. I'm really passionate about both the opportunities ahead of us to be able to work differently and to think differently, and also the potential for people to be able to be a really important part of that change, which is why I'm really excited by the work that 2 Generations are doing. And I was really delighted to come and speak today. I'm just going to speak briefly at the beginning, just to give some context around public sector transformation and innovation, just some thoughts and reflections really from my own experience around what I see as some of the challenges and why I think that person and people-centered innovation is the key to unlocking them. I'm also just going to give an example from some other work that I've been part of actually over 10 years ago now, but which remains increasingly relevant, I think, around the role of people and power in health and care transformation. So none of this will be news to anyone, but hopefully it's just useful context for the conversation that we're all going to have together this morning. I think we're all aware that the context around public service delivery has changed dramatically since the public sector, as we know it and experience it, was originally set up. The post-war consensus sort of supply and demand model, and a model where colleagues working in the public sector often have the power to be able to help people who were in need at the point where they needed it, and those of us who needed help were confident and secure that that would be available at the point when we needed it. I think we all know that the past decade, past 20 years, but particularly the past decade has been extremely challenging. I think we are all experiencing and seeing the results of the breakdown of that consensus. I think what that means is some big questions about what the future will look like. It also poses a really big question around what is innovation in this space. So if we recognise that the model that we may have grown up with and that we're used to working with has changed dramatically and is unlikely to go back to that for a whole load of reasons, the experience of those providing public services can often be that people are feeling very frustrated, and the experience of those needing public services can often be that they feel the help isn't there when they need it. So there's a big question there about what innovation will look like in this space in the future. So I'm a huge believer that public services are all about people, that people deliver them, people receive them. They are about what we all need as people to feel safe, healthy, connected, supported, protected. It's often the case that really brilliant public service is almost invisible because it's just something that is there exactly at the point when you need it. You don't have to ask for it. It's a quite a sort of magically connected experience when it happens. I think in that context, we have to recognise that innovation also has to be about people. When I first started my work in public services about 20 years ago, it was in the era of e-innovation. There was a lot of excitement about digital pens. What I can see is that obviously technological transformation is hugely important, and it is massively impactful, and it has allowed us to do things in ways that most of us would never have thought possible 2 decades ago, a decade ago. That said, those innovations are all about bringing us closer as people, allowing us to connect better as people. At the core of it is always the human experience. So very much my philosophy, oh, sorry, Justin, if you wouldn't mind just going back to that, is just to say that a lot of the work that we're all doing is around finding new ways for people to connect with each other, finding new answers to old problems, and then finding ways to work together to co-produce solutions that meet the needs of people today. And that co-production is as much in the design of the solutions, so the work that 2 generations do to really understand what would work, what would be a really innovative way of supporting people to be healthier, safer, in more connected communities, and also people actually delivering that, so living the experience of coming together, living together, and providing that sort of that community at a micro level as well as a big level, which is so important. Just as an example of other work that is sort of relevant and happening in this space, is some work that my colleague at PPL, Simon Morioka, undertook in partnership with Nesta and Innovation Unit. As I said, this work took place 10 years ago. At the time, People Powered Health, we thought that it was so brilliant and so innovative that it was bound to kind of take off and just become the normal way of doing things. That has not been the case over the past 10 years. That doesn't mean that the work is not still useful and really powerful. The People Powered Health work was, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to the next one, Justin, just quickly, thank you. Just give a bit more detail around what this work was about. But Nesta funded 6 teams who were already doing innovations such as 2 generations would have been a perfect example, innovative work that's happening within the community. People were funded to scale that work, to connect with each other and share those ideas, that innovation. And then we were able to look at what would happen if this was done at a much larger scale. What was really clear was that the benefits existed on every possible level. So the individual human experience of people was just better. People were much more engaged in the challenges they had. They were able to offer a level of kind of creativity and innovation in the way they shared and supported each other, that with the best will in the world, those of us on the public sector side didn't have the space or the time, even 10 years ago, to be able to think about. The atmosphere that comes from exercising personal agency is extraordinarily powerful and creates innovation in spaces that, again, were unable to, you couldn't design them. You basically, it was almost like capturing something that was happening. And financially, we know, and I know that a lot of speakers today will be focused on this as well, we know that the earlier people are able to be supported by each other, by the services around them, by ourselves, then the longer and happier the time they have, and the longer people remain healthy and well. And ultimately, that means that the point at which they will require expensive care, which is very intensive, will be much shorter. And the financial benefit is obviously part of that. But I think the other thing we often lose sight of, which is equally important, is that there is this huge human benefit to that. None of us want to be in hospital. All of us want to be living fulfilled lives within a broad community, having variety and excitement in our day, and doing that in a way which is something that allows us to exercise our humanity and to enjoy just connecting with people as we choose. So the context I just wanted to set today is that I think that thinking about innovation in the context of people and relationships is extraordinarily important and really powerful. The work that 2 generations are doing is a really practical example of how that works in practice, and is a really exciting opportunity to take that forward. It's a real message of hope in terms of something we can do differently that will create something that is actually better. But I know Jens is going to talk about this later on. It is also a really practical response to the financial challenges that we find ourselves in. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Luciana. I'm really conscious that the next speakers are, I think, the stars of the show. But thank you very much, and I hope that was useful context.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that very, very helpful opening presentation, giving us lots to think about and setting the context for our webinar today. I now have great pleasure in introducing to you Gretta and Rick, who are going to speak about their personal experiences. And they'll be interviewed by Lisa Goldsobel to facilitate the conversation. I'm very, very keen to take people's questions specifically at the end of this section. So if people want to put them in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to hand over to Lisa.
Thank you. So following on from everything Claire's been talking about in terms of innovation and how we can really affect change in people and their relationships, Homeshare is not just a great potential tool in the toolbox. It's something that is making a significant difference to real people right now, every day. I am head of service delivery at 2 Generations, and myself and my operations team have the very fortunate position of seeing every day how much Homeshare can benefit individual householders, allowing them to remain independent in their homes, creating affordable accommodation for people, and creating long-lasting friendships and relationships. 2 brilliant examples of this are Gretta and Rick, who are huge advocates of Homeshare. They featured on BBC Hampshire, where they became local celebrities for a period of time. They've spoken at our Shared Lives Plus webinar, and they've also given us a lot of time very generously at meetings with the Department of Health and Social Care. Gretta and Rick have been together in a Homeshare for over 2 years now, and we're delighted to have them with us today so that they can share their real life shared experiences of Homeshare. So Gretta and Rick, good morning. It's lovely to see you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'd just like to start. We obviously know each other incredibly well, and it's been a long-standing relationship over the last few years. But I'd like you to share with other people, perhaps if we start with you, Gretta. You first got in touch with us in August 2021. Can you start by telling us what led you to getting in touch with us and looking for a Homeshare?
Yes, well, I was invited out to drinks one evening, and I decided to go, obviously, and was walking down the drive and fell, hit my head, my leg, my knee, and I got up. I still went to drinks, but I realized that I could no longer live on my own. My family didn't live near. My son was in America and my daughter was on the Kent coast. So something had to happen. I had to find a new way of living.
And how did you get in touch with us?
Well,
What led you to 2 Generations and Homeshare?
I actually don't quite remember how I got hold of Homeshare, but certainly somebody.
It was your daughter Jane found it.
I think it was possibly my daughter Jane who gave me Homeshare, and I contacted Lisa and went from there.
And at the time when we were having those early conversations, what was it that you were looking for from a Homeshare? What was it that you needed?
Well, I didn't really know. All I knew was that I could no longer live on my own.
And so we had various conversations, and we talked about
That's right.
the support, some companionship, and some practical help that might benefit you, to essentially allow you to remain independent in your home. Unfortunately, we found Rick. Rick, just tell us a little bit about how we came in touch together.
Well, I had prior to lockdown, I used to rent a room down in Chichester and stay with my partner up in Clanfield. This is all in Hampshire. And during lockdown, we joined it. I gave up my room because it was silly to keep it, and I wasn't living there. So post lockdown, I was made redundant. I was only 3 months from retirement, so I just retired. And it now, in order to get somewhere else, I wasn't going to be able to afford to rent a home or so I was looking on spare rooms, .com or whatever they are, and noticed this particular one because it was a fraction of the cost of rental. And I thought, oh, there's a near 90-year-old who's looking for sharing a home. I'll investigate and find out what this is all about. And I made an application, and of course you accepted. And I thought, oh, it sounds wonderful, because it allowed me not only to just rent a room, share some facilities, but basically I've got the sharing of the whole household. I'm happy to do gardening, and I love gardening, so I do that. I love to do cooking, so I do our cooking. So I've taken on a lot of roles that I wouldn't have been able to with staying with my partner. And I feel as though I've now got not just a rented accommodation, I'm actually part of the household. And yet we have our independent lives. I do my own thing. I go off to bridge, golf, etc. And Gretta has her circle of friends, but she's able to stay at home, and she's got the security that I'm there at night. If something should go wrong, she can shout, and I can help get emergency services. I'm not a carer, and that was not our agreement that we would be. But she's got a presence in the house. She can go to sleep at night knowing that there's somebody else in the house. Should anything happen, she's got the help.
And Gretta, how did you find the process early on? Because it's quite a big change having somebody come and live with you when you're used to being on your own. So can you explain a little bit about how you felt in terms of the process of how Two Generations sort of took you through that process from that first inquiry to the point of Rick eventually moving in with you?
Well, initially I asked a close friend to come and meet Rick and have a chat with him. We had coffee together, and then Jane came over from Kent and met Rick, and then my son Andrew Zoomed us from America and met Rick there. I also am a Christian, so I have great faith and believed that what I was doing was the right thing. And as I say, I have great faith.
And early on in the process, we very much made sure, as you mentioned, that your family were involved in supporting you with the decision as well, and that they could be a part of the process with you. And now it's fair to say, I guess, that Rick was welcomed in as part of the family. And as he quite rightly said, we don't find lodgers, we find companions, and the idea is that a sharer becomes a part of the family. What do you think would have happened, Gretta, if we hadn't found that match for you and you didn't have Rick with you as a sharer?
I don't really know. I hadn't thought that the horror of going into a home was just something I really couldn't bear. Although I'm 92, I'm quite lively. I do walk every day, so being committed to a home would really not.
It wasn't something you wanted or something that you were in any way ready for, was it?
No.
Mention it and she shudders.
And so what is it like living together in a home share? How do you manage your routines together day by day?
Well, I must say we're very polite, and we do for example, when this is all over, I'm going to ask Rick to make some scones because I've got some friends coming.
Now you tell me.
Friends coming to coffee tomorrow, Thursday morning, and he's very good at making scones. In fact, he's super cooking. So and it just works out.
You often tell me that you're spoilt, aren't you?
I'm a spoilt brat, totally spoilt brat. I have all the cooking, all the gardening, all the computer work done for me.
So what would you say to somebody who was considering home share? I know you've always been strong advocates. What would you say to them?
I would probably invite them to coffee and show them how it works for us. Yeah. I'm fortunate that I've got 4 bedrooms in the house, so Rick has his own bedroom, and he shares another room for doing whatever he likes. Recently, his daughter came over from New Zealand with the grandson and stayed here, and that was a very happy time. So all our families get together. My son is coming over from America in April, so we'll all stay here, or Rick may go and stay with his friend. But yesterday I was on a call to my son, and we were talking, or the boys were talking golf. So it's a very happy situation.
I'm very pleased to see it, and it's always been a real delight to hear from you both and to see how much it's had an impact on you both so positively. I think we probably might want to give the opportunity to see if anybody has any questions beforehand. Is there anything else that you wanted to share in terms of your experience of Homeshare?
I'm just over the moon. It's given me a life that I wouldn't have been able to have otherwise, and I've got the freedom to do my own hobbies and things, and I've got a garage now which I use for doing hobbies which I wouldn't have had otherwise. So yeah, I'm over the moon with it, and I can only recommend it. But it does you need to sort out relationships of where your boundaries are, and we did that on the first day. I think Gretta and I, we're both pretty open and pretty friendly. We're both grandparents, so we understand children and grandchildren.
Sure.
And so we agreed that if there's anything that bugs us, we must be open and say it. Don't hold it in. So we sorted out. We had two very important things, and one of them is a bit embarrassing for Gretta, I think, was it? About the loo seat.
Oh yeah. I have to get up in the middle of the night, so I back into the loo, and if the loo seat's down, well, it's disaster. So I have to say to Rick, please will you remember to keep the loo seat up?
You only asked me once.
It's always very important to have open and honest discussions and manage expectations from the beginning to make sure that we have these successful and long-standing relationships. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time. I wonder if, Luciana, if there are any questions that have come in.
I will just say, if I may, that the first night that Rick was here, I went to bed and I knew that it was going to be safe. I was going to be safe, and I trusted it. And
said your prayers
alive in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gretta and Rick. It's been fascinating to hear your experience, and great to see your relationship. And thank you, Lisa, for facilitating those questions. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Philip Monaghan. And Philip will introduce himself. Thanks, Philip.
Thanks, Luciana. Morning, colleagues. My name is Philip Monaghan. I work with Two Generations on partnership development as my background. Mixture of health and local government, working with St John Ambulance, and prior to that at Knowsley Council in Merseyside, where you can probably tell that from my northern vowels. Gretta and Rich, thanks so much for sharing your story and being so honest as well. Truly inspiring. Justin, can we move to the next slide, please? So in terms of this short discussion, really wanted to open up and unpack a bit more about home sharing, how it works, what's involved in terms of practical steps, ranging from safeguarding through to the matching, but ultimately, so what? What's the benefits of doing this for partners who want to potentially engage with both households and social enterprises like Two Generations? So just to recap on what do we mean by home sharing, it's matching a householder with a house sharer, and the motivations for the two parties coming together can be around companionship, it can be around the need for help at home, and it can be around access to quality housing. So in terms of Two Generations as a community enterprise, we've been operating now for nearly half a decade, and we've matched hundreds of sharers and households across the country, both metro and rural areas. And again, we've pivoted this around where we can help most. Some of that is specifically around adult social care, but we've also been asked to step in perhaps unexpectedly where new crises have emerged. So during Homes for Ukraine, we were asked to help out too. We know we're not the answer to every challenge, but we hopefully see ourselves as a tool in the toolbox for local authorities, integrated care systems, and voluntary sector organisations. Key though is a joined up approach, and that may involve working across through social prescribers, housing colleagues, as well as adult social care teams, and so on. In terms of where we can help, listening to what people are asking of us or sharing their stories with us is overwhelmingly people who want to engage in home sharing are either looking for a solution around affordable quality housing in terms of the sharer. The vast majority of the householders are seeking companionship and friendship. And also, if you just look within that, what we're seeing is 1/3 of the people who we're working with at an early stage of dementia on Alzheimer's. Again, we're not, we see ourselves as one piece in that puzzle. And so in terms of that particular cohort, it is at an early stage. Also interesting, what we've seen over the recent period is 1 in 10 of home sharers approaching us are at some point in that hospital discharge journey. And that's really important, but also can be quite scary for people who were looking to help, who may be literally calling us from the hospital bed because they're concerned about returning to the home and that lack of support there. So either through working with referral agencies, an example is included here, or directly from home sharers as well as partners, we're hoping to help meet this unmet need at that lower end of complexity. Our mantra is that no match is better than a bad match. And so safeguarding is everything of everything when it comes to what we do at Two Generations. So as eloquently talked to with Lisa, Gretta and Rick in terms of how we bring parties together, there's a formal vetting process, which is not just around DBS checks in terms of personal backgrounds, but applications, interview. We have matching that involves trial periods, but this isn't match.com. We're really interested in that ongoing support and care. And so that's why we also engage in regular check-ins as well as ongoing support for both sharers and householders, which include, I think, from virtual coffee clubs and so on. It's really important when Gretta and Rick told the brilliant story was around not just in terms of the details of the agreement, but also personalities and particular wants, things that we don't want. So in terms of that matching process, include, do you like pets? Because if you lured it to cat fur, this isn't going to work for you. But also in terms of the type of support you need, what we heard is great. Rick is not just an excellent baker, but gardener too. Really what works for Gretta. And so in terms of that, both sifting and that formal agreement, that ensures up front that we've put in the appropriate checks and balances, as well as to monitor that as we go through to minimize any bugbears that arise, such as toilet seating arrangements and so on, as we heard. Again, a brilliant anecdote. So as part of that, working with partners, we fully understand, particularly with public bodies who may want to work with us, that rightly, as a public institution, risk and liability is a concern around that. So again, listening and responding is understanding how Two Generations can work with partners to understand how, whether it's regulatory, resource, or just purely in terms of reputational considerations, we can assist with that. So we're able to pivot through our technology. We have a robust vetting procedure in place. That, in terms of those contractual agreements, is between Two Generations and the householder and the sharer. And that we regularly report progress to partners to reassure colleagues, and in particular local politicians, that we continue doing the right thing by people. Please say that we're able to do that because we're bringing together a cohort of experts, which include people with backgrounds, technical backgrounds, in everything from social work through to housing. Move to the next slide, please. Really proud to work with an array of partners in this space. So this includes both local authorities through to other social enterprises and third parties. Again, we don't have all the answers, but we like to think we're one piece of the puzzle. And part of that is us investing in relationships that create the space to do new things. And I think it was really important what Claire touched on at the beginning is some of the challenges, particularly when in local authority or third sectors, there's a perfect storm of less resources, more demand for help. There's a challenge of creating that space to do things new. So hopefully we can help with that. So in terms of how we're working with different entities, starting with public bodies, there's different ways we can potentially partner. At an entry level, that includes us helping to train up partners to embed referrals in a locality with two generations. So working with colleagues across adult social care, social prescribing, or housing in terms of joined up action to make them aware of this being a new tool in the toolbox. And essentially, we'll take it from there. For other colleagues, they want a deeper dive approach to working with us. So that this may include piloting or secondments. Why would public bodies want to do that? That's because perhaps they need proof of concept to reassure themselves, but also bring along leaders along with them on that journey of change. Next slide, please. Within the third sector, really pleased that we're already engaging with voluntary community and social enterprises. And some of that involves where we're seeing examples of AGK, which we'll come to in a moment, already have some type of shared living or home share type arrangement, but they're looking to bring in specialist capacity so they could scale up quicker. So as part of that, again, there's a referral system within there, but recognizing peers in the social economy, a resource challenge too. Part of that model includes us sharing those revenues and fees with that partner. So just to unpack this a little bit more, hopefully bring it to life. What we're seeing in terms of across those different types of ways of working is, really chuffed that we're working with a number of brilliant partners. So in terms of local government, we're already working with Waltham Forest, and that came through the adult social care team, and specifically around aging well. So, talking to what Gretta eloquently put around, supporting re-ablement and living at home for those who want to and have a really brilliant life and just need a little bit of help at home. So we've been working with Waltham Foresters through that, and that includes us both training and seconding a colleague to that council. Really, again, pleased that throughout health and social care, we're interested in this as innovation as part of them looking to create new space to try new things. In terms of Age UK, we're working with one of the London districts. They had an existing scheme, and they were keen to work with us to say, how can we bring in specialist expertise so we can scale up what we're doing already? And so we have a partnership arrangement in place to allow us to do that. So hopefully we're a flexible partner who's able to co-design new solutions given what is needed locally. As a plain-speaking northerner, ultimately it comes down to, so what? How does this help? So at a human level, in terms of two generations, this is two people coming together to help each other be better. And some of that might be around loneliness and companionship. Some of it might be access to affordable housing. But as mentioned earlier, we're also seeing it around hospital discharge. Financially, we know there's a new wave of austerity, and that's putting further pressure on stretched local authorities, and even the new integrated care systems are being asked to make a 25% reduction over the 3-year period since their foundation. And so as part of that, what we're seeing in the marketplace and what we're hearing is there's multiple financial benefits in terms of not just invest to save, but save to save by doing the right thing, as well as these other non-financial outcomes. So in terms of the typical cost to a sharer to enter into an agreement, it's much cheaper than equivalent of renting a room up and down the country, recognising there's different rates. So that includes the north, where I am, as well as higher rates down south. But also, I think, as Rick talked to, it's not just equivalent of renting a room in terms of that value, it's that wider benefit of being in a home and so on. We also see through that just in terms of hospital discharge, and also in terms of the costs for paying a carer to do non-care activities, particularly in the carer field where there's high turnover. We don't want to ask a skilled carer to do brilliant but non-skilled duties, whether that's around cutting, whether that's around baking, gardening, and so on. For any number of reasons, then, in terms of financial, there's a clear case to be made around that. As a social enterprise, though, St John's is really keen that the cost isn't a barrier, and that's why we have a bursary scheme that allows us to help householders enter into agreement with 2 generations. We know for some people, environment is a key consideration too. So if you just think about in terms of the political debate about building new towns as well as new homes on greenfield sites and so on, or the cost of just remediation from clearing brownfield sites to put in new homes. In terms of that existing housing stock where it can be sweated, the environmentals would be significant. So if you think about just in terms of carbon intensity, people sharing a vehicle or a household compared to living alone, never mind the financial and social benefits. It's really important when Claire talked at the beginning as well, setting the scene around carving out space to do things differently. So even if there is an answer to the so what question is, where do you find the time and the space? So really pleased that the Department of Health and Social Care just a couple of weeks ago launched a major new fund called the Accelerating Reform Fund, which allows people to play in this space. So we'd absolutely be open to colleagues who are interested in partnering with us around piloting in that area. I'll stop there. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to listen and enjoy. I look forward to participating in the group discussion later on. Thank you.
We're now going to come on to our final speaker of this presentation before we move on to the question and answer session. I'm going to hand over now to Jens, who will introduce himself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You can hear me fine, right? Yeah. So my name is Jens. I work in public sector reform. So I design, storytell, and implement operating models for organizations that provide city and community solutions. So these are places where we live, work, invest, learn, visit, and play. And I've been doing this for some 22 to 24 years now. So I today want to talk about the money. So this is about everything I'm talking about today is about from a point of view, from a local authority point of view. So money obviously drives the majority of our decisions we make nowadays. I think the money is gone. It's unlikely to come back at least anytime soon. Something I call, we've kind of entered a period of permanent austerity. Short to medium term, the pandemic, monetary and fiscal policies has just blown a significant hole into our budgets, while the demand of our services is going up. Add to that the cost of living crisis, new housing regulatory bills, climate targets, temporary accommodation pressures. All of these have an impact on our budgets and the demand that drives those. I think it's fair to say that long-term funding pressures is only part of our problem. I believe that our long-term financial resilience rests on our ability to manage demand, to find ways to actually look at those areas rather than salami slicing from our budget. I don't think that salami slicing works, and I don't think that anybody believes in it, either our politicians, the council, or the public. So next one, please. There are only 5 ways of saving money really in a local authority. So since we talk about the money, I'm just going to quickly go through those. The first one is you look at the supply chain. So you squeeze the supply chain, you look at all your suppliers, and you get a better deal from that. And the second one is you transform services. So you do more or the same for less, or you have somebody else doing it cheaper, which again probably is going to fall then into the first part of the supply chain. And then you can sell assets. So you can sell buildings, what we call capital receipts in local government. Disadvantage of that is these are one-off savings, one-off cash flows, and the ongoing revenue savings are just marginal, things like electricity, energy, security, and so on. So it's not going to solve our problems by selling more assets. And then also the disadvantage of that is if you do sell assets and do sell buildings, then you have later on it limits the opportunity to sweat that asset in regards to rental income and other things. And then we can stop or charge more. But then all of these things have to be done within the limits of consultation, and we still have our statutory obligations that we have to deliver. The first 4 options, I think, ways of saving money, I think after 13 years of permanent austerity, I think it's fair to say that the majority of local authorities have explored all of those. And I think many local authorities, as we can see in recent news with Section 114s and bankruptcies left and right and center, I think it's fair to say that we've kind of come to a tipping point. So the answer really, I think, lies in finding ways, new ways of managing demand. So this is about taking the root causes of service demands, and focusing on those areas that enables us to prevent issues from escalating into crisis. And Homeshare, I believe, does that. Next slide. A few areas I put down here on the left and right, and where Homeshare can actually help us managing demand. One of those are around loneliness, provides companionship, overnight presence, and we've heard from Gretta and Rick earlier some real life examples of how individuals can really benefit from having a companion in their house, and helping and support with the how-tos, and sometimes that's just very simple things like, if you do interact with the council, for example, or with other organizations on how to fill in an e-form online, for example, how to use basic things like a laptop, digital inclusion, really important. So it facilitates independent living. Lack of independent living does create additional burden to the council. Nobody's arguing here that Homeshare will prevent demand. In most cases, it actually delays some of the demand, but you can delay that demand and you can therefore manage it. Contact handoffs, again, if you have a lot of contact with the council, it's somebody who is in the household will be able to help you with those contacts. So that's either making a call on your behalf with the contact center. If you live in one of our housing, one of our accommodation, and there's a repairs and maintenance to be done, and then that individual can call on behalf of the household, can log the call, find their ways through the e-forms, take pictures, and then also manage the ongoing contact with the council. And again, these things can be very time consuming. Some councils are better than others with digital inclusion, with customer contact, but customer contact is unavoidable. And therefore, I think having companionship in the household who will be able to deal with those matters, it does have an implication on our budgets in a positive way in regards to demand. Digital inclusion, I touched on that earlier. Again, a lot of elderly are not digitally, not very savvy digitally. So having somebody in the household who can show them around and enter certain content on a system that might be just online shopping, but also might be logging a call with the council, or booking a train ticket or whatever that might be. Again, quite important. And then everything around the household. So if the sharer does live in one of the council properties, then any contact with the council in regards to repairs and maintenance, any rent payments, anything that has to do with getting in touch with refs and bans, council tax queries, or any other queries, obviously having somebody in the household that can help with those will reduce the burden on the council, and will most likely also reduce the contact handoffs. And then there's something I put down on the right-hand side, some of the benefits. So obviously there's a reduction in other social care demands, because people live longer independent lives, and there's something around customer context, but there's also something around the healthcare sector. So doctor's visits, arranging for that, picking up medication from the pharmacy, but also simple things like keeping people active, right? Activities at home, that might be fitness, that might be going for longer walks, and making sure that people live a healthy lifestyle. And then, as Rick said earlier, he's a fond chef and loves to cook, making sure that those who live together have a healthy lifestyle and eat healthy and regularly, and quite important. But then also take the medication after your food, and take the medication regularly. So there's always somebody who reminds and guides that person through that. Over to you, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jens. That was really, really interesting. We've now had quite a complete picture from the compilation of all the different speakers that we've had so far this morning. And thank you everyone for your contributions so far. Really keen now to take any questions that people may have. We've had a number that have come through already, and just want to encourage the participants with us on the line to continue to put any questions you may have into the Q&A box. I'll take them in turn. If I can ask all our panelists, not everyone has to respond. If you've got something to add, please do, but don't feel obliged to add anything unless there's something that you feel is helpful. As I mentioned, we had lots of comments in response to Gretta and Rick's presentation, thanking you both for sharing your story and how great it was to hear. The first question I have here, from forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I'll have a go. Debisa from the Alzheimer's Society is the question: does this scheme operate in Northern Ireland? If someone wants to put their hand up, if they perhaps Philip, you're best placed to answer this, possibly.
Yes, so we don't have any formal partnership with local authorities in Northern Ireland, but we have had to have individual home shares there, and I recall that includes Belfast. Lisa, dissuade me of that if that's not the case.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. So in terms of two generations, we absolutely operate across the United Kingdom and have home shares outside of England, mentioned Fife, Perth and elsewhere. Thank you.
I should add that some questions have been answered already in the written text box, and so I'm going to ask the questions that haven't been responded to. I will come to the ones that have already had an answer, and then if anyone wants to add anything to that answer, I'll give the opportunity to do so. But for the sake of this, for all the participants, I think it'd be helpful to share what those questions are. I can see that Justin is just typing an answer in response to the question about whether everyone will get the slides. Perhaps Justin, you can share it with everyone via audio. That'd be great to hear from you.
Yes, Luciana, happy to share all of the slides, and we will also share a copy of this recording afterwards so that you can play back as much or as little as you need. And hopefully we'll have a chat with Rick about whether we can obtain his scones recipe as well.
Thumbs up.
I was just going to ask that if you could do the. Sorry, I've been also responding on the texts. So if a copy of that could be included with the recording as well.
Will do. Yeah.
I
Thank
So we just had another comment, was someone sharing that they've been really interesting, and thank you to all the speakers, especially Gretta and Rick. Lived experience is always the best way to explain a project like this, and sorry from Sandra that she had to leave to attend another meeting. An anonymous attendee asked the question, what's the cost to a householder? Because we saw in that previous presentation that there are, the approximate cost is around £100 a month. I assume one is loss of single person council tax reduction. If I can ask any of our panelists to specifically respond to what those costs are, and perhaps Gretta as well, you might want to add to that as well.
Okay, well, what happened in our agreement, that was brought in, Gretta brought that to the attention before we started. So what happened was her contribution was lowered and I pay the extra bit for that. And that was right the way through our contractual time. So, yeah, and then we have private agreements now as to what we do, if we have any other things. So what we do, for instance, is we share our I make a contribution towards electricity and things like that, but we also share our shopping. We go grocery shopping every week together. One week Greta pays and the next week I pay, and we try and balance it fairly. I think I eat a lot more than Greta does, so I think I'm getting the benefit of that. But we're happy with it.
I get it cooked.
Yeah, that's right. That's my part of it. Okay, I think that covers it. So that we can come to whatever agreements we have privately, as well as the formal ones that are agreed contractually beforehand. But the council tax, for instance, was taken into account in the contract.
Thanks so much. Philip, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, thanks, Luciana and Rick and Gretta. So in terms of the revenue model is that for 2 generations, to allow us to do the vetting, ongoing matching and care and so on, is there's essentially an agreement between 2 generations and the home sharer and the householder, and the average cost of that is £99 per month to the householder, and then £299 per month to the sharer, which is paid to 2 generations. And so, as Rick talked to, is then outside of that, there will be conversations between the parties around sharing utility bills, grocery bills, and so on, depending on those types of arrangements. Specifically in terms of the question about impacts on council tax, particularly if it's a council home, it's a council owned asset, is that it's in the discretion of the local authority around permissions to allow somebody into that building. So as we set out in our agreements, though, is just making sure all those, just from a belts and braces point of view, all those arrangements are in place, which again we can help with. Lisa, just wanted to turn to you in case I've missed anything. You wanted to add anything, please?
No, I think that pretty much summarizes, and obviously all of the financial agreements and arrangements are laid out very clearly early on. So we're very clear and transparent, managing everyone's expectations, and obviously all of those details are put in our contracts and agreements as well. So it's very clear for everyone to refer to.
Thank you so much. The next question I've got is, are there any special considerations given in relation to someone with dementia, bearing in mind the effects of the disease can fluctuate on a day-to-day basis?
I'll turn to Lisa for that, because I know that we've been doing work as a dementia-friendly organisation.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, as part of Dementia Friends, it's something that we're incredibly aware of, and that it's an ever-changing condition. So we are in regular contact and support with our Homeshare matches throughout Homeshares in general, at all times. And it's a position where sharers are in a very unique position to flag any concerns or changes that might be happening in the home, as well as the family or the householders raising any concerns. And in those circumstances, we're able to offer ongoing support and make appropriate changes where necessary. So it's something that we will always be very aware of and in regular contact with Homeshares, so that if there is a dramatic change in circumstances, we're able to support both the householders and the Homesharers. If the match needs to come to an appropriate end, we can support the Homeshare throughout that.
Thanks so much. If anyone else wants to indicate to contribute to any of the questions, please do share. I'll move on to the next question. How many matches have there been in areas already partnering with 2 generations, and over what time period? I know we had the figure of, I think it was 325 matches on your slides, Philip. Do you want to expand on that question?
Lisa, are you okay to say that? Is that okay?
Yes, so we have various Homeshares that have obviously been put together throughout the country, as well as the Homeshare matches that we've done in support with the Homes for Ukraine and Harrow Council as well. So there's been several hundred matches, some of which are through, as we said, Homes for Ukraine support. Others are our direct Homeshare matches through 2 generations. I personally have put together over 70 Homeshares, I think it is now, in the last few years, and we have an operations team that are regularly putting matches together as well throughout the country.
Thanks so much. Next question is, are you working with Age UK National on Homeshare, or contacting local Age UK partners individually, i.e. as with your association with Hillingdon, Harrow and Brent Age UK?
Thanks, Luciana. Justin, can I ask you to pick this up, because I know you're managing the relationship with Age UK, please?
Yes, of course. So we're working very successfully with Julian Lloyd and the team at Hillingdon, Harrow and Brent, and we've reached out to a number of other Age UK organisations in different locations, and some of those conversations are progressing quite positively. We're also in touch with Ruth Lowe and a couple of the national Age UK team. Just conscious that when it comes to local delivery, it's very much down to the local organisations. So we're very keen to develop more of those local relationships. And if there are any Age UK colleagues on this call, or if there are any connections or people that you feel that we should be talking to at different Age UK teams, then please do get in touch afterwards, because we'd like to help with those where we can.
Thanks so much. And the next question I've got is from Barbara Ashcroft, and she asked, what is the minimum age for a house sharer? As the slide mentioned, not suitable for young people. Philip, is that one for you, or Lisa?
I'll refer to the expert Lisa, who manages our operations.
Officially, the minimum age is 18. I don't think we've ever had any sharers younger than about 23, 24. It tends to be something that if we're going to have students, they tend to be mature students that apply as sharers. But if they are willing and able and they have the right ethos and attitude to be a great sharer, as long as they pass our vetting process, then they're welcome to join us as Homesharers.
Thanks, Lisa. Just building on that, because safeguarding is everything to us, is what we wouldn't do is match 2 vulnerable parties. And what we mean by that can't include a child. So that's why it's an adult as a sharer, as a householder.
The first question was like, how long did the process take from your first engagement to Rick moving in? And so Gretta and Rick, thanks for your answer, which says it took less than a month. 2 generations did checks into the introduction. We made contact and arranged our own meetings till we agreed to go ahead. 2 generations did all the contractual agreements. Perhaps a follow-up question to that, for both Lisa and maybe Philip as well, is that usual, a month, or can it take less, or does it take more? Is 1 month the average?
I would say probably a month to 6 weeks is probably an average, but it's very much a piece of string scenario. And as we say, for us, no match is better than a bad match. And we don't ever rush the process just to get somebody in. For us, it's really important that we've gone through those early stages, and we're making the right match to ensure that longevity. It can often very much depend on the practicalities and the requirements of the householder, you know, whereabouts they're living, any specific requirements they might have of their sharer. We might find it slightly more challenging. But for us, as we've said, the process is never rushed. It's something that has to feel comfortable for both parties. But I think Gretta and Rick, those sort of 4 or 5 weeks is probably an average, particularly in terms of London-based or main city centres. We'll have a huge pool of sharers that we can fortunately interview from and make sure that we're finding the most suitable match.
Thanks so much. There was a question about whether the scheme accommodates short-term or respite stays, or whether it's only for the long term. You see, you've replied that householders and home sharers initially commit to a minimum of 12 months so that both parties have reassurance of longevity. But you can, however, form part of a hospital discharge step-down journey alongside shorter-term immediate discharge solutions. This is, I think, a question that I was certainly keen to know the answer to. It was, how often do you do follow-up checks once the match is in place? Gretta and Rick shared that the agreement was the first month being a trial period during which we could opt out at any time if not suitable. You were almost in daily contact with two generations, and thereafter a 6-month period is agreed with monthly feedback and contact. Contact is less frequent now, but still occurs, and we can contact if any circumstances change. Lisa added, as we said, we are in regular contact during the first month's trial period. Following that, there's check-in monthly, and then for matches like Gretta and Rick have been together for such a long time, you check in sporadically, but ensure all matches know your two generations are always available to be contacted should circumstances change.
Sorry, Luciana, I would just add to that in saying that for us, it's very important that, you know, we always explain to our matches, we don't just say good luck, goodbye. We're very much a part of the ongoing process and the relationship, and we're aware that circumstances can change, whether it's the health and situation of the household, or whether it's the personal circumstances of the sharer. And it's really important for us that all of our home share matches know that we are there as a constant point of support throughout the duration of the whole home share, specifically in those early few weeks when householders and home sharers are finding their feet and finding their routine together.
Thanks so much. I'm coming back now to the open questions, and I've got one more. So I've got two more questions, and please keep them coming if there's any more. We've still got some time. So the first question is from Sean Johnson at Lincolnshire County Council. You mentioned the Accelerating Reform Fund. That was on your slides, Philip. What's the cost to an organisation, be that a local authority or voluntary and community sector organisation, wanting to partner with / promote home share, or are all the costs met by householders and companion sharers who are matched?
Thanks, Luciana. Great question. So in terms of how we operate at Two Generations, because we engage in direct bilateral agreements with the household and house sharer, it may not involve the local authority at all. What is happening, though, is a number of local authorities we're speaking to are interested in getting to scale as quick as possible because of the social and financial benefit to do that. So as part of that, they've asked us to come in and either train some of the staff, or to engage in a pilot study, or to send a secondee. In the case where they've asked us to come in and train, do a pilot, or send a secondee, the cost is so low, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you what it is, which ranges from £500 for every 6 months up to £10,000 to £25,000 over a 6 to 12 month period. That's for the local authority should they want to engage with us to do a pilot. But again, it may cost you absolutely nothing to just do those referrals. Just wanted to make that clear. When the examples of people approaching us, Luciana, to do that is because there's some short-term ability to create space to do something new. So it comes back to Claire's earlier point, is how do you find the space to do it? Okay. In terms of the third sector, in terms of Age UK, absolutely zero cost to the third sector. Indeed, were the referring householders to us, the Age UK example is we share a percentage of those fees with them, because we recognise as a community interest company, operating environments are tough, so we need to share the benefit of that with those third parties as part of that arrangement. Hopefully that answers the question. Thank you. If it's okay, I had a question for Claire and Jens, really, about, clearly we're likely to have a new government by next Christmas because of, legally frameworks around when elections occur. What do you think the capacity is going to be like? We've got world wars and so on to do new things across the political spectrum. Luciana, I'd welcome your views on that too. Do our national leaders have the emotional space to try new things in the current environment?
I mean, I can kick off if it's helpful to give a political answer, but obviously the caveat being, I'm, full disclosure, I'm a former Labour member of Parliament, and so you've asked a political question and I'm giving a political answer. I don't think anyone's complacent about what the outcome of the general election will be. We expect it to be in 12 months' time. Anything can happen within those 12 months, but if you were going to ask me to put money on it, on current polling, which has been consistent, it looks like we might see a change in government. But in terms of what that would mean for the public sector in response to Jens' presentation, I don't think we can, expect lots more to be in the pot. Certainly not at the start of any new government, just because the public purse is at a pretty dire moment. We meet this morning, probably as we are together, the King's speech is happening, and we're expecting an autumn statement. And it's fair to say that the public finances are not such a good state. There might be a tiny few crumbs, but it's certainly not going to come into this type of social care. I would say, as someone who is a former shadow health minister and covers and follows health policy quite closely, I think there's great appetite amongst the opposition for public sector reform and to look at innovation in different ways of delivering things, and also to ensure that all forms of social care, of which we could include this in that bucket, in terms of helping people not enter kind of formal social care, as we heard from Gretta, that you will have in a potential new government people that are very receptive to alternative models like this, and looking at ways in which, in particular, we can keep people well, that we can keep people in their homes, that we can look at early intervention and prevention. That's certainly been the kind of thrust of many speeches we've heard from the opposition in some recent speeches. But in terms of what that translates in terms of additional resource, I think we have to be realistic to know that certainly, we're not going to see kind of additional finances flowing quickly, but certainly there's a real appetite to see alternative models like this, and there'll be great interest in it. I don't know if Claire or Jens wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So I echo what Luciana said. As I stated on my slides, that the money is gone and it's unlikely to come back. Opposition policies are welcome. I think there's a focus moving from crisis prevention, intervention. I think there is public sector reform coming our way, but at the end of the day, you can only cut a cake in so many different ways. And we just heard this week that quietly that central government have just settled and given back 170 billion pounds on bond losses to the Bank of England that has to be paid, will be paid back over the next 10 years. These are big numbers. So whoever comes into government next will have to continue with permanent austerity, or will have to make some very, very difficult choices financially. But we are, on a local level, are preparing ourselves for permanent austerity to continue, and that's why this offer has got to be part of the mix.
And all I would add to what Luciana and Jens have said, I would agree with everything they've said. I think that I would agree that the climate we're in is the climate now. I don't see any, whatever might happen in the next 12 months, I don't see any sort of growth in the resources available. I think what I would hope for is a growth in the leadership available around some of these areas. So some really positive messaging around the importance of this kind of innovation and the power of community the power of people to work together to support each other. I think people are crying out for that kind of leadership at the national level. I think there's a real opportunity. We look forward to a potential change of government that we might get some strong messaging around that. And I think that might lead to also a growth in innovation, so a willingness to think differently about these challenges. And I think that some of the themes we've talked about today have been around not supplementing public service where public service is required, but actually doing something which is much more innovative, which is to step in before in a space which has previously not been available for people to receive support in, to completely change the nature of someone's journey through the receipt of public services. That kind of innovation is something which is, as I say, it's about leadership, communication, vision. It's not necessarily about resources. And I always tend to make the distinction between optimism and hope. So I'm not really an optimistic person. I don't tend to think that passively good stuff will happen. I am profoundly hopeful. I believe that we have to be hopeful, and because that's the spur that keeps us going and that gives the power to that innovation. So I am hopeful that there is a space for things to be able to be done differently in this area, and that with the right leadership and the right language around innovation in this space, we can do things. We can expand the work that you've been talking about this morning, we'll be talking about this morning, and that we can do things differently and better.
It's been my absolute pleasure. It's been fascinating to hear in more depth and detail. I recall from my time as an MP in Liverpool, where there was a similar but different scheme that I got to see firsthand, and I saw the value that it brought to everyone. So great to hear about this programme in more detail, and great to hear the very practical questions that we've had. So people from different voluntary and council organisations are able to know more and hopefully take things forward. We don't have any more questions. So I'm going to conclude our time together and thank all of our panellists for your time, for your contribution, and for answering all the questions so generously. It's been a really fascinating session. I hope that for all the participants, we've still got 27 people on the line, I hope that you have found it interesting and useful too. Please do follow up with Two Generations if you've got further questions or opportunities to engage with the scheme. Certainly if I have the opportunity in later life, this is something that I would like to participate in. So thank you so much for joining us, and as you've heard, the recording will be made available afterwards alongside with the slides, and we'll seek to capture the Q&A also so that everyone can have a record of our time together this morning. And thanks everyone for giving up their time and joining today's event.
Thank you.
Thank you.